Okay, so I think everybody will have likely joined by now. So once again, hello everybody, and welcome to this webinar titled The 7 Habits of Effective Cybercriminals. My name is Maurits Lucas. I'm Director of Product Marketing at Intel 471. Before I made the jump to product marketing though, I spent about 10 years running CTI teams and chasing after interesting actors in the cyber underground. I want to share some of the kind of the observations that we made over that time with you today. So what we want to cover in the next 30 minutes or so is briefly start off by setting the scene, tell you a little bit about who we are and why should you be listening to us when we're talking about the habits of effective cyber criminals. What is the cyber underground actually like? This is key to understanding why these 7 habits. And then we'll jump into the actual habits themselves. I'll talk a little bit about our background and the approach we took to this particular research. Then we'll look at the 7 habits. We'll also look at each of those habits in a little bit more detail. I'll provide some examples of actors showing those habits, or what happens if you don't show those traits. We'll finish up with the outlook. The interesting part about this research is that it has a large sociological aspect to it. We looked at sociological factors. And one of the things we also want to touch on is the sociological reasons why actors kind of enter the cyber underground and why they opt for a life of cybercrime, basically. And then we'll finish with the summary and conclusions. So let's get started. Who are Intel 471 and what is the cyber underground actually like? Now, we're a cyber threat intelligence company. We collect intelligence or data in what we call the cyber underground from a team kind of placed around the world. And we take that data and we turn that into intelligence for our customers, also located around the globe in multiple industries. Now, our team is dotted around the globe for a reason. We call it a boots on the ground approach. The idea is when we're collecting intelligence in the cyber underground and we're looking what actors are saying, who they're communicating with, and what they're doing, then our researchers and our analysts want to blend into the background. We want to insert ourselves in actor communities. We want to insert ourselves in communications. We want to be able to interact through sources with actors and people who kind of inhabit the cyber underground. And we found that it sounds counterintuitive because this is, of course, cyber after all. You can do it from anywhere in the world. But if you want to pass yourself off as one of them, if you truly want to blend in, we found out that the best way to do that is to actually be located in the same geographical area as the actor ecosystem that you're tracking. So we have people in Eastern Europe, we have people in Asia, the Middle East, South America, Western Europe, the US, North America, dotted around the globe, tracking these local actor ecosystems, collecting information, both adversary intelligence, what actors are talking about, but we also collect technical information on the malware infrastructures that they're using. And we turn that data into specific, looking at the problems through specific lenses. So adversary intelligence, what adversaries are up to, but also things like vulnerability intelligence to find out which vulnerabilities are trending in the underground. What are actors keen on exploiting, which helps with patching. Credential intelligence, looking at stolen credentials, which come across our desk because there's a lot of stolen credentials sloshing around the underground, but also looking at what's being sold in underground marketplaces. So all of these products come from the intelligence that we collect. Now, the whole idea behind what we're trying to do is to help our customers move from a reactive standpoint when it comes to mitigating cyber risk to a more proactive standpoint. That is what intelligence allows you to do. It allows you to look at things that are still threats that are still over the horizon instead of waiting for them to turn up on your perimeter. So the further out you go, the more proactive you become. And looking outside the perimeter often starts with looking at the malware, for instance, the tools that actors are using. But the real long-term insights come from realizing that behind these malware infrastructures sits an actor, and that actor is trying to accomplish something, and that actor is working with others or maybe what you're seeing is only part of an entire business process or part of an entire attack that's playing out. So joining those dots together by looking at what the actors are talking about, what they're discussing, that really helps to see what's going on. And this slide shows you where our approach of looking at both the malware and looking at the actor communications fits in. The little arrow at the top between those two boxes is actually very important because of this unique vantage point. We can track both the actor, but we can also look at the tools that the actor is using. And that allows us to look at risks and threats from two perspectives or from multiple perspectives at the same time. As I said, the area we play in is the cyber underground. So let's look a little bit about what the cyber underground is actually like. And I'll start off actually giving a counterexample. I'll show you what the cyber underground definitely isn't like. It is not an iceberg. Now, I realize that I'm telling you that the cyber underground is not like an iceberg, so please don't think of it like an iceberg while showing you a picture of an actual iceberg, but bear with me. Also, I keep referring to it as the cyber underground. I know that a lot of other people refer to it as the deep and dark web, but the term deep and dark web and pictures of an iceberg are not just unhelpful. They are actually, they're wrong. They're very much wrong. And if people talk about things like deep and dark web, they are misunderstanding the very nature of the problem. And that's really rather unfortunate. So the idea is this: one of the key concepts around why you can focus on actor communications is that many of the threats that we are faced with today, and many of the threats that we're actively working to mitigate, are not the result of a single actor or even a single group of actors. Rather, it's groups of groups working together, each of them playing a small part in a bigger whole. You can think of them as business processes because actually, to a very large extent, that's exactly what they are. They are value chains or business processes. So let's switch away from this picture of a deep and dark web and an iceberg, because actually the cyber underground, if you want to use an analogy, use the analogy of a bazaar or a marketplace. It's limited in size, and it is actually fairly structured because it is the actors that inhabit the cyber underground that create that structure. And that is because if you think of these threats, for instance, things like ransomware, it's not a single group that runs ransomware attacks. Rather, there are multiple players involved. Ransomware attacks often start off with an actor selling initial access to a network. Then an affiliate will move in and they will take that initial access and they will actually run the ransomware attack. That means they will take that initial access, move laterally through the network, exfiltrate data, and then finally deploy the ransomware. But they don't write that ransomware themselves because what they do instead is they get that from another supplier. Quite often they rent it, ransomware as a service. They're part of a ransomware group. And that group provides the infrastructure and the software to allow the affiliate to run the ransomware attack. So all of these actors want to find others to partner with, and a deep and dark web makes that actually really rather difficult. But instead, a structured cyber underground, like a marketplace, it facilitates that. It facilitates actors to find others to partner with. So think of it as a marketplace. There are specific areas dedicated to specific topics. So if you're interested in bulletproof hosting, there are forums you can go to. There are threads on those forums where you can talk to or meet actors that are interested in buying or selling bulletproof hosting. The same goes for ransomware, for stolen credentials, for database dumps, etc. So if the underground marketplace or the cyber underground is limited in structure, then we can map out that structure. We can identify the top tier actors. We can identify who they're talking with, what kind of products they're offering, what those characteristics have. And in that way, we can work out what goes into kind of the ingredients that go into the threats that you are faced with every day. And that is exactly what we do. So we track a lot of actor communications, a lot of actors that inhabit this underground marketplace, selling, partnering, buying goods, products, and services. And that kind of led us to ask a question, and that gets us into the 7 habits. The basic question was, we have about 12 years worth of data of tracking actors, actor communications, actors interacting, we track their careers, etc. Now, some of these actors are around for a very long time and have very successful underground careers. And our question was, can we, if we look at all that data, can we find any common traits that actors that have successful careers in the cyber underground all share. To do this, we made a couple of assumptions. The first is that effective or successful at all actors basically act rationally and they make rational choices. From sociology, this is called the rational choice theory. It basically, like the name implies, it means their behavior is rational and they're always working to kind of increase their profits or increase their rates of success. So everything they do is geared towards that. If they are completely irrational, then they're just basically ping pong balls or pinging around with absolutely no rhyme or reason to it. But it's a fairly safe assumption that actually actors do act rationally. Also, in order to do this, we purposely limited ourselves to cyber criminals or financially motivated actors. The cyber underground also has nation state actors, hacktivists, and all kinds of other actors in there, but they either act less rationally, or in the case, for instance, of nation state actors, there is a rationale behind it, but it is very difficult to distinguish. They may have all kinds of ulterior motives. There are people running them in the background. So we can't really effectively see what kind of rational choices they're making. Whereas for actors who are financially motivated, you can measure their success, and that basically shows you whether or not they're successful. And all of their rational decisions are geared towards making more money. So in order to keep this, kind of make sure that we are looking at pure rational choices, we limited ourselves to financially motivated actors, aka cyber criminals. Now, the approach we took was first we needed to define what makes a successful actor. So we decided actors who have been around for at least a year, have had a positive reputation and credibility in the underground for at least a year, have earned demonstrably more than $1 million US, and have not been apprehended by law enforcement. Those are actors that meet those criteria we labeled as successful. And we started to analyze their behaviors to see if there are specific traits or behavioral patterns that just kept coming back again and again. Now, please, before you see this as some kind of positive, because that's quite a large amount of money, remember that these are the successful actors. There are many, many unsuccessful actors. There are also many actors that fail that last criteria, which is not getting apprehended by law enforcement. So I am definitely not advocating that you all go off and try and have a profitable career in cybercrime, because it is not for everyone. And so there are definite risks involved. But these are the criteria that we set. And so we looked at all that data, and lo and behold, yes, a number of habits that they all shared did keep reoccurring, did pop out. These are those 7 habits. I'll just put them right up here. These are the 7 habits that we saw. They go from shaking hands, aka partnership formation, to exhibiting influential leadership, stepping up, being adaptable and flexible, so being able to change with the tides, having good OPSEC, so polishing your security posture, engaging in opportunistic attack strategies, low-hanging fruit, meaning basically trying to get the low-hanging fruit first. Information gathering, continuous information gathering, so actually putting the con in reconnaissance, and a continuous kind of tendency to professionalize your services, to get better at what you do. So competency makes the criminal. We'll look at each of these 7 habits in a little bit more detail. We'll start off, obviously, with shaking hands. So the cyber underground, like I said, many actors have to work together. So you need to find partners, you need to find people to work with. And building these in this large and complex environment is a challenge. Now, what we find, in sociology has shown us, is that trust between people is a very efficient mechanism to deal with complexity. If you can trust people, you can basically ignore some of the complexity and allow the trust part to take care of that. The cyber underground is actually very complex. It consists of actors who are relative strangers to one another, and that's a choice they make for obvious reasons, working together. So without trustworthy partnerships, that's actually very hard to do. So what we found is that effective actors invest time in building good relationships. They guard their own reputation, and they take care in choosing people to work with. They won't work with just anybody. They will definitely try and build good and effective partnerships. I've got 2 examples First off, a counterexample: the leader of the Lapsus group had a falling out with some of their business partners, and that falling out was so intense that it actually led to other actors revealing the leader's real world identity, which then led to their arrest. So they did not have trustworthy partnerships. On the other hand, I talked about ransomware, and for ransomware affiliates or ransomware as a service operators, they will actually and the affiliates themselves as well, when you want to work with them or join them, they're actually the successful ones will actually have very sophisticated programs and processes to kind of select people that they will allow into the fold, so people that they will work with. So they have these processes to ensure they only work with capable and trustworthy affiliates or partners to make sure that they're building long-standing and trustworthy partnerships. The second habit, influential leadership. Like I said, if a ransomware affiliate group is a good example. Again, when you're working together, when your actors are working together, basically they form a group, and every group needs a leader. So what we've seen is that effective actors actually recognize this and step up to the plate and exhibit that leadership. Now, and you'll see this, and it might have occurred to you as you saw the 7 habits. Quite a lot of these seem fairly obvious because you see them come. They also are very apparent in regular kind of businesses or organizations. And that is because when we're looking at this, the cyber underground mirrors the business world to a large degree. So you see for that leadership, it's the same skills that you also see in kind of regular business: managing, delegating, problem solving, good judgment, balancing both the risks and the advantages versus the threats, group safety, group dynamics, etc. And of course, a good leader should remain calm under pressure. So 2 examples. One is the actor Kerberos. He is a long-standing member of the Russian-speaking underground, first appeared in 2010, and has displayed leadership and managerial skills, actually coaching others, and we've seen the actor delegate tasks to them. Talking about remaining calm under pressure, the actor Wazawaka lashed out at a security researcher when under pressure. The security researcher wrote an article about the actor, and the actor responded to this by lashing out quite severely. And again, instead of keeping his calm and remaining calm under pressure, so the other actors actually revealed Wazawaka's real-world identity, which in no small part kind of hampered their ability to basically conduct their business in the underground, and it greatly damaged their reputation. So remaining calm under pressure is definitely one of those leadership skills that effective actors exhibit. And then changing with the tides, or being adaptable. As the ancient Greeks already said with the famous saying, "Pantarai," change is the only constant. Everything changes. So it's not a question of whether circumstances will change. They will. It's more a question of when they will change. And when they do, you have a choice: either adapt or wither. And that means simply, as an underground actor, that vulnerability you're relying on, at some point, everyone will have patched it and it will stop working. That attack you're relying on, it will cease to be effective. It'll cease to be a great way to make money. Circumstances will change. The tool you're relying on, or the partner you're working with, they will drop off the radar. The source code to what you're selling may leak. And remember, law enforcement and others in the security industry is very active in trying to hamper what you do. So the infrastructure that you rely on may get taken down or be disrupted. It's not whether these things will happen, it's how you will respond when they do occur. And that can actually make or break your career. So effective actors, fairly obviously, adapt when the landscape changes, but they still keep sight of their goals. So 2 examples of this. One is, a couple of years ago, many of the prominent actors that we track were involved with carding, so credit card fraud in one way, shape, or form. But right now, and before that, they were running banking malware botnets, for instance. But as banks got better at detecting these types of fraud, and as credit card companies got better at kind of detecting and mitigating kind of when vendors got breached and cards got stolen, the returns there became less and less attractive. But in the last couple of years, at the same time as this was getting, as card fraud was getting less attractive, what was coming up and becoming very, very profitable indeed were ransomware attacks. So many of these actors pivoted away from carding and actually started working on ransomware and compromised access. So they adapted when the environment changes. Another example is the Lockbit ransomware group. They had what could have been kind of some career-ending moment when, so Lockbit kind of rented out their Lockbit ransomware, but then the source code leaked, meaning why pay the group or why join the group when you can actually use their software for free because the source code was out there. How did the group respond? Well, by writing a new version. And interestingly, for that new version, one of the things they did is they looked at what's important in a successful ransomware attack, and they came to the conclusions that one of the things is once, as an affiliate, you deploy the ransomware in a victim network and start encrypting things, at that moment in time, you run a risk of being discovered. Encrypting everything is a very noisy operation. People tend to notice when they lose access to all of their files. So they decided what is very important is that once you launch it, it must encrypt everything very, very quickly. So the new version of Lockbit was written to be much faster at encrypting than the old version. But not only that, they actually put together a benchmark. They benchmarked other, not just their old version, but lots of other ransomware families that were out there to kind of show that Lockbit 2.0 was an order of magnitude faster. And they put out this very slick and very nicely done kind of benchmark overview to kind of lure customers in. And it was successful. They continued and continue to be one of the larger groups out there. They also upped the ante by then saying one of the other ways to gain access to organizations is actually to get in, to have an insider. So they started recruiting or advertising in the underground that they would be interested in people who could recruit insiders to gain access to victim networks. So again, leaking of the source code could have been the end, but instead they were successfully able to kind of overcome this by writing a new version and actually investing in this benchmark and some clever marketing in the underground as well. Now, if you don't want your source code to leak, one of the things is to have good operational security. So polishing up your security posture. The underground, of course, being the underground, offers all kinds of ways to anonymize yourself and make attribution harder if you know what you're doing. So things like bulletproof hosting, VPNs, Tor, etc., are all kind of mechanisms, as well as cryptocurrencies, which allow you to protect your funds and your transactions. What actors want to do, and good actors do, are always trying to improve their operational security, their OPSEC, learning of new ways to be more secure. Now, talking about these things like anonymization, actors want to strike the right balance between this, because the opposite of this is there's also the reputation. Actors want to create a name for themselves, and they also want to make it sure that other actors know that they're actually dealing with the real deal, as it were. There will be people, if you have a good reputation, people will try to there will be imposters around who will try to trade off your good name and your reputation. So you want to give others some level of assurance that they're actually dealing with the real actor, but obviously giving away your real identity is something that you don't want to do. So perfect anonymity is not what they want, because that makes it hard to build a name for yourself. They want to have that name, they want to have that reputation, but they also want to make sure that if they want to go into hiding, that they can just disappear. And also, when you want to have a reputation and name in the underground, it pays not to be the kind of the biggest name around. If you become too big, you draw lots and lots of attention. That can be wanted, but very unwanted attention, and that means law enforcement. So there are some actors, and a recurring theme that we see is actors taking a break or kind of rebranding when they think we're getting just a little bit too big. We're not comfortable with how big of a light we are. We're attracting lots and lots of attention. So a good example of that is Evil Corp, a long-standing group that's been around for a very long time, and that before this was engaged again in banking malware attacks, for instance, but also turned their attention to ransomware. But they have at least 3 ransomware strains. BitPaymer, Wasted Locker, and Hades are all ransomware strains that Evil Corp was using or basically selling. But whenever the reputation or the got a little bit too hot, they basically disappear, rebrand, and come back under a different name. Sometimes this taking a break can be permanent. So the actor Joker Stash ran one of the biggest underground carding shops, but actually retired. Now, this coincided with kind of that drop in the popularity of card fraud. So there weren't as many people buying cards anymore. And the actor basically decided that they'd made enough money. They wrote a large farewell post and basically shut down the shop and retired. Same thing happened to the GandCrab ransomware as a service. Again, that was one of the larger ransomware families a couple of years ago. And then the actors just decided that they'd had enough time in the limelight, and they shut up shop and retired and disappeared. They later came back under a different name, so that was just a temporary break. But in the instance of Joker Stash, for instance, that retirement was permanent. Low-hanging fruit or engaging in opportunistic attack strategies. What this means very simply is the successful actors and effective actors don't artificially limit themselves. They will go after anything, anywhere. So they're industry agnostic and region agnostic. They will scan the whole world for suitable victims and will go after them. We find that actors that do limit themselves, that will only go after specific targets, are less successful. So if your primary motivation, remember the primary motivation is financial, if you're a cyber criminal, if you also have political or ideological motivations that you that you allow to guide who you go after, those actually tend to hamper your success. I'm not talking about nation state actors. Again, they're not part of this research, and obviously they do have all these motivations, but for them, success is defined completely differently. For financially motivated actors, having these additional motivations is a barrier to success. One of the best examples of this are the initial access brokers. These are actors who try and gain, as the name implies, they gain initial access to networks and then try and sell that off to other actors to kind of monetize. So these access brokers, the successful ones, basically scan everything. They're trying to scan every single system around to see if there are open accounts, open ports, vulnerabilities, anything they can use to gain access. And they are very successful in doing this. So putting the con in Reconnaissance, there's a lot of successful and effective actors spend a lot of time information gathering. They read white papers, they read security blogs, they follow security researchers, they're looking at vulnerability reports, but they're also gathering information on potential victim organizations. They are gathering intelligence as well on hosts, on networks and organizations, on victims, on LinkedIn is a great tool to find people to send spear phishing to, for instance, within an organization. They engage, or they are curious to learn about the psychological principles. They are teaching themselves social engineering and basically engaging in lifelong learning. And the underground will facilitate this. There's a massive underground courses and manuals that you can buy that allow you to teach yourself new skills. So actors are engaged in this lifelong education. One example of this is the actor Bastarlord. The actor actually admitted that they only started hacking as it came out of them playing pranks in school, and later decided they were going to earn their money this way, and then expanding their skills by continuous education. And that actor is now a prominent access merchant with a whole team of actors working for them. We had another actor actually talk about how they studied human psychology to better help them understand how to nudge people to perform the desired actions, how to become better at social engineering people or victims. And then finally, competency makes the criminal, or the professionalization of services. And it's been, as I said, we have 12 years worth of data, but if we look back 12 years or even a decade, what stands out is how the cyber underground has professionalized. how dedicated or ever more niche services are popping up, how these are being ever improved in their quality, and how we see effective actors actually, like I said, it's like a business, and these actors know that they're running it exactly like a business, including reinvesting any profits they make back into their enterprise. They're not just spending the money; they're investing it back into their enterprise to become even better. The services that we see are professionalizing, their communications are professionalizing. You can see that with ransomware. For instance, the example I've put up is one of Clop ransomware, where basically their communication has become much more, it has become much more to the point, transactional and professional. They set expectations, they're explaining to their victims how this will, what will happen, and being very clear about what they're after. So we're not interested in causing harm. We just want you to pay us, and then we will unlock everything, and we will delete everything that we've stolen. So those, in the beginning, those communications were much more broader, and there's much more, but they've become much more focused and much more professional, and actually borrowed a lot from, for instance, call center scripts and all that type of communication. So these were the 7 habits that we see actors exhibit. Now, one other thing we wanted to look at is the outlook. We'll start off, and we want to look at 2 things. What are the prime reasons we see the motivations for people entering this space? And also, we found these 7 habits by looking at 12 years worth of data, but how likely are these habits to be consistent? Will these change, or are these likely to stay the same? Over the short term, the actors that we've analyzed, by definition, these are the successful actors. So they have been successful, likely continue to be so, and they will exhibit these 7 habits. It's because these were the habits we distilled from this group of actors. Others will try to be successful as well, so they'll emulate the current crop of successful actors, and that means they will likely copy these 7 habits. And these 7 habits are actually displayed over decades or 12 years worth of data. So they have been fairly consistent, rather, up to this point. In the medium term, and this is actually where we looked at what actually causes people to enter the cyber underground. And 2 factors stood out. When we look at these actor ecosystems, these underground ecosystems, they thrive in places where people can engage in this type of activity with little fear of negative consequences. So if there's very little fear that law enforcement is going to be able to do anything about this, that's one of the enabling factors that allows this type of activity to thrive. Another thing is, we often see in countries where corruption is rife, or where there's a perception of corruption, that will make it easier for people to join the cyber underground. Basically, I think they see others behaving in a corrupt way, and that kind of removes the barriers, some of the inhibitions they have. Think, is this okay for me to do? Do I want to do this? Basically, everybody else is doing it, I will join. I'd be a fool not to, and they join in. And again, we see them adopting these 7 habits. On the longer term, basically, we've already looked back 12 years, and these habits were fairly consistent. The other is, as I said, adaptability and change. Tools, tactics, and procedures may change, but the mechanisms used to select the optimal strategy, the rational choice theory, those will actually stay pretty constant. Those stay the same. So these 7 habits are actually unlikely to change over time and will remain relevant. So to wrap up, kind of the summary and conclusions, we said successful underground threat actors, defined as, we looked at financially motivated threat actors, and the question was, do they exhibit certain habits? Are there certain habits that they all exhibit? And yes, we identified 7: effective partnership formation, exhibiting definitive leadership, implementing OPSEC, engaging in information gathering, being adaptable, being opportunistic, and professionalizing your services and your business operations. Those are the 7 habits, and these habits are likely to remain constant over time, and that means that these insights will remain applicable and relevant for understanding threat actor behavior. So that's the good news. These 7 habits are likely to remain constant, so we can use them to understand threat actor behavior and to predict it as well. And that brings us to the end of this webinar. If you have any questions, you can send them to us. If you want to know more, and if you'd like to go and look at these 7 habits again, there's actually a blog post up on our website, the 7 common traits among highly successful cyber criminals. I've copied the URL down below. It's not the easiest URL to remember, but if you just go to the website, intel471.com, you will actually, it's fairly easy to find. So if you can't memorize the URL, and I wouldn't blame you if you couldn't, then you can definitely find it there. And with that, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. We've run a little bit over time. I hope you find it useful, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.